in the smoothest man out of the broom closet in San Francisco, California. Live from 95.7 The Game, boy. That's what that big San Francisco money gets you right there. A broom closet out there by the water. Our man Kyle Madson.
$3,000.
Don't get it twisted. This is a nice broom closet, though.
It is. It
has a door. It has a window that looks out into more offices. It's great.
Stuff.
That's a San Francisco apartment as well for about $3,500 a month.
Yeah, this 2-bedroom actually. There's on top of the desk and below the desk.
There you go. There it is, right there. More appropriate introduction of Kyle Madson. Of course, he is the Prince of Niners Wire. He does great work over there at NinersWire.com. Producer at 95.7 The Game in San Francisco and co-host of the Candlestick Chronicles. Injuries have been at the forefront of the week. Again, Kyle, anything really jarring? I mean, it's tough to not compare this year to last year. And we kind of had a conversation while losing starters, of course, is extremely important. This doesn't feel as monumental yet as last year did at week 2.
Yeah, it's you got to compare it to week 1 where Richard Sherman and Dee Ford both went down effectively for the season. Richard Sherman came back late, but it wouldn't feel as dramatic if last year hadn't happened. I think it feels a little more dramatic than it is because of the here we go again nature of it. The bigger issue to me, more than just this year, is or just this week and the injuries in and of themselves, is what went ignored. Like, I think that they have the depth to survive a Raheem Mostert injury. They used 2 draft picks on running backs. JaMychal Hasty can play a little bit. I think they're expecting a little more out of Trey Sermon than what they got last week when he was a healthy scratch. The issue I have is the fact that they did nothing at corner to insulate themselves from a Jason Verrett injury, a guy who in the 5 years prior to last year had played like 9 games, and they signed him to a 1-year deal and called it good. They drafted Diamador Lenore in the 5th round, who was excellent on Sunday. And then they drafted Ambry Thomas, who didn't play football last year, late in the 3rd round. And he's not ready to play. That was very apparent. And their answer was Dante Johnson, who's not good at football.
They got to stop.
So
it's like 4-time 49er Dante Johnson.
They got to stop this, man.
4 times this year. Dante Johnson is a fine, like, back end of the roster. He plays some special teams, and he's a body in practice type of player. But if he's playing major snaps for you, you have a problem. And now they've gone and signed Josh Norman, who was on the street as of last Monday. And then they signed Dre Kirkpatrick, who was on the street as of this Monday. Cornerback play is too important in the NFL. Good cornerbacks aren't just hanging out in free agency going into the regular season. So I think they botched that pretty bad. We talked about it last week on this show. Their cornerback depth, Kenny, you brought it up, it was their biggest problem going into this year. And I think that's played out in week 1 because Jason Verrett got hurt. It exposed their biggest weakness right away.
Let me play a little devil's advocate here, Kyle. And I did this earlier in the week, and I want to get your opinion on this.
The devil doesn't need more advocates, Kenny.
Good point. Good point. They lose Jason Verrett, and that stinks, right? That stinks for a number of different reasons. But get Emmanuel Mosley back. Jimmy Ward's still there. Tart is still there. And aside from Richard Sherman, you look at that secondary, you're like, well, this is actually damn near the same secondary that set records in 2019. And the depth isn't there with this group. But at the same time, the depth wasn't necessarily there in 2019 because they had a guy in Kelly Witherspoon who was unplayable. So what I think happened with John Lynch is he said, we'll get to the secondary maybe next offseason, next draft. He looked at 2019 and he said the key to us getting back to something like that is we need the pass rush. And as long as the pass rush is back on par with what we saw in 2019, we'll get by with the guys in the secondary that we have right now. Is it going to work that way? I don't know. But I think that was more so his thinking. Handle the pass rush. That will help the secondary.
So I have two things on this. I think you're right. They're a defense that's built front to back. But the problem is, one, you can't just say aside from Richard Sherman, he was an all-pro. And now they're replacing him with a 5th-round rookie in Diamador Lenore, who, again, to his credit, allowed 1 catch on 4 targets for 3 yards against the Lions in his debut, and he played 90 snaps, I think which is insane. But they didn't have to. We didn't know what their depth really looked like. Akella Witherspoon was playing like an all-pro before he got hurt. And then when he came back from his foot injury, he wasn't as good. But
you couldn't play him. He was getting subbed out in the middle of games routinely.
Yeah, at the end of the year, for sure. He was not good when he came back. You're right. But they had Emmanuel Mosley. If Emmanuel Mosley goes down now, they don't have that same luxury of having another starting caliber player off the bench. So that's the issue, is they built this secondary to be 100% healthy when it's like, man, Emmanuel Mosley hasn't been 100% healthy. Jason Verrett, his injury question mark is the problem with him. So I think you're right, though. To that point, if Emmanuel Mosley comes back in week 3 and plays the final 15 games, and if Diamador Lenore in week 1 is how he's going to be the rest of the year, then you're right. They're going to be fine because it's still K'Wan Williams. It's still the Tart Ward safety pairing. But for me, it's all right. Emmanuel Mosley isn't healthy. That's not something you can count on. And now you're counting on a 5th-round rookie to be awesome, and you're trying to figure out how to not be a disaster on the other side of him. Because, I mean, no matter how good your pass rush is, if your cornerback straight up can't cover a guy, you're going to have an issue. So I'm not saying they need to go trade for Stephon Gilmore, which I don't even think they could do. They don't need to make any crazy splashes yet, because if Emmanuel Mosley is healthy, that helps. But they have a depth issue at corner still that I don't foresee getting fixed anytime soon.
Yeah, I feel you.
Did the final 3 minutes of the last of week 1 bother you? Did it leave you feeling any sort of way?
Yeah. For one reason, like the Deebo Samuel fumble, whatever. The bigger thing I took away from the Deebo Samuel play was that Kyle Shanahan, with the game on the line, put it in Jimmy Garoppolo's hands. He said, you're going to roll out, you're going to make a throw, which was the bigger deal to me. Deebo Samuel fumbling is, that happens. The weird bounce on the onside kickoff, George Kittle's face mask, weird football thing. It happens. The concern to me was the depth that we just talked about. It was Dante Johnson, it was Ambry Thomas, and both of them got torched multiple times. Jared Goff turned into Aaron freaking Rodgers in the final 3 minutes because they didn't have anybody who could cover Quintez Cephas and Tyrell Williams. No disrespect to those guys, but come on. Yeah. So if this is a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, they're going to have to cover guys who are much better than that wide receiver pairing. So that was the thing that stuck out to me, was just how helpless their defense was without Verrett. But no, as far as the oh man, they're going to start giving up 40 points a game, that's not something I'm concerned with.
The other thing that stood out to me with that, and I've said it a couple times, I'd like to know what you think, Kyle, is you mentioned it early in this conversation about how the injuries wouldn't be a big deal if last year we wouldn't react to the injuries the same if last year didn't happen. I feel that's kind of what happened with Kyle Shanahan at the end of that game. He even said as much. There's a bit of PTSD with him, with the fan base. And when he saw, remember, Verrett goes down, maybe a player or two later, Ward goes down. And then I think it's either Al-Shaair or Greenlaw wasn't in the game. I think it was Al-Shaair. He went down, and Kyle was like, get these guys the hell out of here. Let's just get the hell out. And he said, I wanted to just keep my guys safe. And I think some of that played into what happened with that comeback as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They pulled their starters, gave up a touchdown, then had a weird bounce, and then it was off to the races. So, yeah, I get why he wanted to pull the starters, but I think it's lesson learned. I think you gotta roll the dice and get one more stop.
Yeah.
Kyle Madson, host of Candlestick Chronicles and a producer over at 95.7 The Game in San Francisco, with us here on D-Lo and KC and ESPN 1320. I'll lift the question that Kenny and I have talked about a great deal this week, straight from a Niners Wire article. What's up with Brandon Aiyuk?
Great question. Read the article, find out. Next question. No, so here's what I think happened. I think the Brandon Aiyuk's in the doghouse thing got overblown because of what happened to Dante Pettis. It's worth remembering Dante Pettis going into his second year, that was 2019. In the first game, he played 2 snaps. 2. Brandon Aiyuk split snaps with Trent Sherfield, who by all accounts had a great camp. So I think Kyle Shanahan got his messaging mixed up a little bit. He brought up the hamstring, and then there was this weird thing from Matt Mayoko about how Brandon Aiyuk needed to handle things more professionally, but we never got really any explanation on that, no deeper dive on that. I think what happened, my takeaway from what Kyle Shanahan said and just kind of putting puzzle pieces together, is that Brandon Aiyuk had the hamstring injury. He missed some practices. The practices he did have, he was inconsistent. And Trent Sherfield came in and was awesome for the entire camp. Mohamed Sanu, the most veteran receiver on the team, calls him textbook Trent because he does everything exactly right. And you can see where a coach like Kyle Shanahan that demands so much from his players in terms of doing things exactly right, you could see where a player like Sherfield would be appealing to him. And so I think what happened is you get Trent Sherfield, who had this awesome camp, and Brandon Aiyuk, who's a better player, but just had a more inconsistent camp. All right, they're going to split snaps because the Niners don't run a ton of 3 receiver sets. So you're not going to get an opportunity to put them both on the field very often. So you're going to have 2 receivers. All right, well, Aiyuk and Sherfield are on pretty level footing right now based on what we saw in camp. So they're going to split the snaps. I think Sherfield got one more snap than Aiyuk did. I expect that to change, though. If you want to sell your Brandon Aiyuk stock, I will take it. I think he's an awesome player. I think he's going to continue to kind of re-earn his job as the number 2 wide receiver. And it wouldn't surprise me if he winds up as the wide receiver 1 again by the end of this year. He's way too talented to be splitting snaps. Again, no disrespect to Trent Sherfield, who I think is good. Aiyuk's just a better player, and he should be.
So you're telling me this is not J.J. Stokes and Terrell Owens, like I mentioned earlier in the show?
No, I don't think that that's what we're saying. Although if it is and Trent Sherfield's going to be TO, like the Niners would take it.
Right.
Like that's it. They could. Sorry, real quick. They could have a situation where, okay, Brandon Aiyuk's not very good, and he can't beat out Trent Sherfield, who should probably be a wide receiver 3 on a good team. It's either that or Brandon Aiyuk's still awesome, and Trent Sherfield just happens to be really good too. He just didn't get the opportunity in Arizona. Yeah. So there's a couple different ways it can play out.
The other thing about that real quick name is me and Damien have talked about this before, and people are saying, Aiyuk's in the doghouse and all this other stuff. And from everything that we can gather, if he's in the doghouse, Kyle will say he's in the doghouse, i.e. what he said with Trey Sermon, right? Like Trey Sermon is not good enough. You know what I mean? And Aiyuk, he didn't say it. He said, man, he's battling something. Sherfield's doing really well. It's not a knock on Aiyuk. It's just more so he hasn't been there and Sherfield is out there playing. And I'm going to take him at face value with that.
Yeah, I am too. I think the doghouse thing got so overblown because of Dante Pettis. Like Dante Pettis was just not good.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know if Kyle, but that is a hell of a place for Kyle's camera to freeze. That is fantastic. I thought it was like this big dramatic pause, like Kyle was going to launch into this massive explanation. It went, Dante Pettis isn't that good.
That's it. No, that it requires no additional explanation.
It was like, well, point made. I mean, it's solid.
But sorry,
that was good stuff.
Sorry, the internet in the broom closet's not great, but no, to that point, like Dante Pettis isn't suiting up for the Giants right now. Hey, he's just not a good player. That's why he was in Kyle Shanahan's. Kyle Shanahan didn't make him a bad player. He's just not good. Yeah. So I think there was this huge concern with that, and I think we're going to see Trey Sermon suit up. With Trey Sermon will probably get touches this week, and I think we're going to see a bigger role for Brandon Aiyuk too.
What do you think we see in the run game? Does it change now with Raheem Mostert out?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't think Eli Mitchell probably gets 18 carries again. I think they will probably split those a little more with JaMychal Hasty. I think they had just game planned for Hasty to not be involved very much because they were expecting it to be Mostert and then Mitchell and then Hasty is the RB3. So yeah, I think we see the kind of 1-2 with Mitchell and Hasty, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see Mitchell as the 1, and actually Trey Sermon is the 2. Shanahan said he was Shanahan and offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel both said that he was better this week. He was running more aggressively, practicing with a purpose. So it wouldn't be surprised to me if he's actually ahead of JaMychal Hasty while Hasty takes on that kind of third down goal line role.
Why does Kyle Shanahan hate primary running backs? Like 18 carries to me. Like you look at the way that he played last week, he being Elijah Mitchell, like he was fantastic.
Yeah.
But you seem to already know, like, and I remember vividly a conversation with you where it's just, Kyle's not that guy. It's just not what he's going to do.
Yeah, it's just the Shanahan kind of way. It's just you find a running back. You can find running backs anywhere, undrafted, 6th round, 3rd round, whatever it may be. You're going to get production with those guys, and so rather than leaning on one player for 20 to 25 carries a game, it's, hey, we're going to have this guy for 13 carries, and then we're going to mix it up and we're going to throw in this guy for 12 to 14 carries. It keeps players fresh. It keeps defenses off balance if there's different running styles. I think if they signed Ezekiel Elliott for the minimum, it wouldn't happen. But I'm just, for example, if they had a player like that, or a player like Christian McCaffrey, or pick a great running back, I think you would see them get like a lion's share of the touches and snaps. But when it's Raheem Mostert, who, is kind of just a guy, or Elijah Mitchell is a 6th round rookie, I just don't think that there's a huge need to give that guy every touch.
Help me out with this one, Kyle, because I've got a thought about drafting players and production and things of that nature. And the draft, the NFL draft in itself is already an inexact science. Any draft really is an inexact science. And I feel like a lot of times, and this comes up, with Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell and Aubrey Thomas and Lenore. And people look at it like, man, another high pick missed by John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. But it seems like they hit on Elijah Mitchell and Lenore. And they look at that. I look at that. Everybody looks at that. And they say, in a perfect world, you're so good at drafting at the end of the draft. If you would hit at your top guys, you'd have like this perfect draft all the time. But once again, this goes back to the inexact science of drafting. It doesn't really work like that. And the way I look at it sometimes is, you go to a draft, if you can come away with 2 to 3 starters, it really doesn't matter where you pick them, then that's good. Is that fair? Like, it doesn't matter where you pick them as long as you get 2 to 3 starters? Or do you have to hit? I mean, obviously they have to hit on Trey Lance, but like, do you have to hit on 2nd and 3rd round? And it doesn't really matter that you hit on the other ones if you miss on those early ones.
So I think, if every single draft in rounds 5 through 7, you're landing 2 or 3 starters, like, that's great. But what quality of starter? Are you getting an all-pro? Are you getting a Pro Bowler? Because that's typically where you're going to get players in the first 2 or 3 rounds. That's where you're going to get your all-pros, your Pro Bowlers, your Hall of Famers. Granted, that's not rock solid. You can get great players later in the draft or even after the draft. But if there's a consistent pattern of missing on 1st and 2nd round picks, like, that's a massive issue in terms of building long term, because you're not going to hit on late round picks all the time. And those late round picks you do hit on, it's like, you're not always going to find George Kittle in the 5th round.
All right.
You're not always get, like, Dre Greenlaw, for example. Dre Greenlaw is a really good player, but is Dre Greenlaw ever going to make a Pro Bowl? I'm not so sure. So you'd like to see them hit on 1st round picks, because that's where the great talent is. And you want to see a team get to develop great talent. It certainly increases the margin for error, but no, for right now, the draft isn't a huge thing yet. But if we're looking at 3 and 4 years and the 2020 and 2021 draft classes just aren't really offering anything for them, I think you can look at it as more of an issue.
Is the fear of the mobile quarterback back with Jalen Hurts out there this week, who looked really well as both a passer and on the ground last week. That had been a concern for the San Francisco 49ers defense for the last couple of years. Are we on alert for the RPO this week with Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think so. Granted, it's like, here's the thing. Like, the Niners defense in 2019 was awesome, and they struggled a little bit with the Kyler Murrays and the Russell Wilsons and the Lamar Jacksons. But guess what? Every team did. Mm-hmm. It's not like this is an exclusive 49ers thing where a quarterback that can move gives them trouble. It just makes this really great pass rush look a little more ordinary. Mm-hmm. And so I think Jalen Hurts is going to present a lot of the same problems, especially if he's going to be as accurate as he was last week. The interesting thing that I was looking at last night was his efficiency when he's blitzed versus when he's not blitzed is crazy. He averages almost 11 yards per attempt when teams bring extra rushers. When teams only bring 4, or at least this is against the Falcons. When the Falcons only brought 4, he was like under 6 yards per attempt, which is abysmal. That's really bad. He was completing a lot of passes, but they weren't going very far, and the Falcons are rallying to the football and tackling. So I think that's actually what the Niners are going to try and do. I think they're going to try and keep Hurts in the pocket, really defend against designed runs, and when he does drop back, keep him in the pocket, force him to throw short, and then rally to the football because that's where they're going to have success. It was a lot of short throws. It was a lot of underneath stuff. He took a couple. I think he had 2 throws of 20-plus yards. But they're going to, I think, keep everything in front of them and then use their athleticism in the back end to kind of get to the football and put him in 2nd and long, 3rd and long, where he's going to have to make throws that he didn't have to make against Atlanta.
2 things real quick, Kyle, before we get you out of here. Number 1, Al-Shaair, I really like what he did in week 1 against the Lions. I think he's a good ball player. He looked really well. Is he the Dre Greenlaw replacement? Who replaces Al-Shaair? Like, how does that work out? Then we asked the guy in Philadelphia what the path was to an Eagles win, and he gave it to us. So I'm going to ask you, what's the path to a 49ers win in Philadelphia?
I think it's what I just said offensively. Like, you can't let Jalen Hurts get in the rhythm that he got in last week, where he was completing everything. I think he completed 77% of his passes. He was getting whatever he wanted on the ground. If they just need to tackle. Like, if they can tackle and the Eagles are going to attack short, I think they're going to have a hard time scoring. On the other side, they have to keep Jimmy Garoppolo clean. Garoppolo was really good last week, but he also didn't face a ton of pressure. It's not so much the concern about him standing in against pressure. He's really good at that. But when the pocket's collapsing, can he still make good decisions the way he did last week? Can he not throw it into another into a defender's chest the way he's been liable to do? So I think as long as they can keep Garoppolo upright, I don't see how the Eagles are going to slow down the 49ers. Their defenders in the second level, especially with their linebackers, I think are the type of players that Kyle Shanahan can really take advantage of. And if you give Garoppolo any kind of time to let plays develop, I think they're going to be fine on that front. And then, like I said, it's on the other side. It's about tackling and not letting them create yards after the catch and putting them in 2nd and 3rd and long, and forcing Hurts to make some plays he didn't have to make last week.
Kyle, you're tremendous at talking.
Thanks, man. Wow. Is that a nice way of saying I'm long-winded?
No, you're tremendous. What do you mean? You're a great talker, great writer. It's why you write and talk for a living. Candlestick Chronicles, wherever you get podcasts from, NinersWire.com. And of course, you could catch Kyle on many weekends on 95.7 The Game in San Francisco. Kyle, we appreciate you.